Alright, this is chapter 2 for Deuteronomy in the Prager Rational Bible on Deuteronomy. So we'll get to verse 1. Fortunately, this one's going to be a lot shorter than the other one. Alright, verse 1. We marched back into the wilderness by the Sea of the Reeds as the Lord had spoken to me, and skirted the hill country of Seir a long time. Verse 2. Then the Lord said to me, verse 3, you have been skirting this hill country long enough. Now turn north. Alright, here's the first section. God is not ethnocentric, and Israel is not to expand beyond the promised land. Verse 4. And charge the people as follows. You'll be passing through the territory of your kinsmen, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. Though they will be afraid of you, be careful, verse 5, not to provoke them, for I will not give you of their land so much as a foot to tread on. I have given the hill country of Seir as a possession to Esau. Now there's two great moral lessons here. Here's what Prager says. One is that God is interested in all nations, not only his chosen people. Agreed. Because ultimately salvation will go to the Gentiles. And this is repeated throughout the Torah and the rest of the Bible, and it is inherent to the Jewish chosenness from the beginning. God told Abraham, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed by your descendants. Genesis 22:18. Yeah, because ultimately Christ would come through Abraham, and through the preaching of the gospel, people of all nations can come to Christ and be saved. And the very purpose of chosenness is to bring God and his moral message to the world's nations. Well, ultimately, Christ and his gospel. And the many nations shall go and say, come. Well, this is from Isaiah 2. Come, let us go up to the mount of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may instruct us in his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For Torah, literally instruction, shall come forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation, and they shall never again know war. Isaiah 2:3-4. This is ultimately describing the new heavens and the new earth, which will come after Jesus returns. Therefore, God set aside land not only for the Israelites, but for other nations as well. God chose the Jews, but God is not ethnocentric. So, see, for example, Amos 9:7. Are you not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel, says the Lord? Have I not brought Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Kaphtor, and Aram from Kir? The other great moral lesson is that there is no allowance for imperialism in the Torah. There are no other promised lands. This one in ancient Israel, and then the ultimate promised land, the new heavens and the new earth, the new Jerusalem, which is, as I said, is what Isaiah 2 is talking about. Alright, and then another moral first. Here's verse 6. What food you eat, you shall obtain from them for money. Even the water you drink, you shall procure from them for money. If there was another nation or religion in the ancient or medieval world that prohibited its soldiers from seizing food or water from nations that traversed, I'm unaware of it. Israel was stronger than Seir, but no matter how strong it was, Israel had no more right to take food and water from a weaker nation than a stronger individual has to take food and water from a weaker individual. Right. Who complains? Next section, verse 7. Indeed, the Lord your God has blessed you in all your undertakings. He has watched over your wanderings through this great wilderness. The Lord your God has been with you these past 40 years. You have lacked nothing. And yet, they complained. Though the Israelites lacked nothing, they still continually complained. There appears to be little correlation between people's well-being and how much they complain. Many people who live in the freest and most affluent countries, and who themselves are particularly affluent, complain more than their less affluent fellow citizens and more than people living in poor countries. That is true. In America, we definitely do a lot of complaining. Yeah. So, because sadly, when we have it easy, we're not as grateful for what we have. So, and we're not as grateful, then we want more. And when we're not so grateful and we're wanting more, then it's going to be easier to complain more. Alright, similarly, it's impossible to gauge from people's levels of complaint. Yeah, it's impossible to gauge from people's levels of complaint how much they've actually suffered. Many individuals who have suffered terribly almost never complain, and many people who have had it very, very easy, comparatively easy, constantly complain. Alright, verse 8. We then moved on away from our kinsmen and the descendants of Esau who live in Seir, away from the road of the Arabah, and away from Elath and Ezon Geber, and we marched on in the direction of the wilderness of Moab. Verse 9, and the Lord said to me, do not harass the Moabites or provoke them to war, for I will not give any of you of their land as a possession. I will not give you any of their land as a possession. I have assigned Ar as a possession to the descendants of Lot. And Lot was a nephew of Abraham. And many people condemn the Torah for positing that God assigned a specific land to the Jews, but they never mention that the same Torah posits that the same God assigned lands to other nations as Jews. At the very least, this should undermine the notion of an ethnocentric or a chauvinistic God. Verse 10, it was formerly inhabited by the Amim, people great and numerous and as tall as the Anakites or Anakim. And like the Anakites, they are recounted as Nephim, but the Moabites call them Amim. And similarly, Seir was inhabited formerly by the Horites, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed them, wiping them out and settling in their place, just as Israel did in the land they were to possess, which the Lord has given to them. Up now, cross the Wadi Zered. So we crossed the Wadi Zered, I guess the valley of Zered. All right, verse 14. And then the time we spent in travel from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Wadi Zered was 38 years, until that whole generation of warriors had perished from the camp, as the Lord had sworn concerning them. All right, in the aftermath of the Israelites' panicked acceptance of the report of the spies that they were too weak to prevail over the Canaanites, the whole community broke into loud cries and said, It would be better for us to go back to Egypt. Yeah, Numbers 14:1 and 3. And God, seeing the people's lack of trust in him, decreed to the generation decreed that the generation of the Exodus would die in the desert. In Numbers 14:21 through 25. Alright, verse 15. Indeed, the hand of the Lord struck them to root them out from the camp to the last man. 16. And when all the warriors of the people had died off. Now it's striking that Moses called the generation of the Exodus warriors, given the generation's fear of fighting. Very funny, very ironic. Alright, continue, verse 17. The Lord spoke to me, saying, 18, you are now passing through the territory of Moab, through Ar, and you will then be close to the Ammonites, but do not harass them and start a fight with them, for I will not give any part of the land of the Ammonites to you as a possession, and I have assigned it as a possession to the descendants of Lot. Again, God forbade the Israelites from fighting a specific nation. 20. It too was counted as a Rephaim country, and it was formerly inhabited by the Rephaim, whom the Ammonites called the Zamzuzzim, a people great and numerous and tall as the Anakites. The Lord wiped them out so that the Ammonites depossessed them and settled in their place. 22. As he did for the descendants of Esau who live in Seir when he wiped out the Horites before them, so that they dispossessed them and settled in their place, as is still the case. So too with the Avim who dwelt in the villages in the vicinity of Gaza, the Caphtorim who came from Crete, wiped them out and settled in their place. Alright, 24. Up, set out across the Wadi Aron. See, I have given into your power Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land, and begin the occupation, engage him in battle. Now, in light of modern criticisms of the Torah's description of the Israelite conquest of Canaan, in which the Israelites were ordered to kill virtually all the inhabitants, one should be aware that these orders were unique. And that is why there are no such instructions here regarding the conquering of Sihon, only engage him in battle. Now, in the case of the Midianites, the nation that sought to seduce the Israelites and have them return to idolatry, there was an order to single them out for destruction. Numbers 25:16 through 18. However, we know this directive was never actually carried out, because the Midianites appear later in the Bible, in Judges, when they invaded Canaan, and they drove the Israelites into the hill country, and they plundered their crops and cattle for 7 years. This is in Judges 6, and then God would raise up Gideon to defeat the Midianites. Alright, verse 25. This day I begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under heaven, so that they shall tremble and quake because of you whenever they hear you mentioned. The book of Joshua, the book that follows Deuteronomy, reports that the Canaanites came to fear the Israelites because they heard about the Israelites' military successes. One being the battle with Sihon, which Moses recounted here. This is in Joshua 2, where basically even the people of Jericho were terrified of the Israelites. So they've heard about all these things. And Rahab, who was hiding the spies, heard about these things. But this is in Joshua 2. Alright. 26. And then I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to King Sihon of Heshbon with an offer of peace as follows: Let me pass through your country, and I will keep strictly to the highway, turning off neither to the left nor to the right. What food I eat, you will supply for money, and what water I drink, you will furnish for money. Just let me pass through. Yep, this is in Numbers 21, where money is not mentioned, but Moses apparently filled in a detail here. Viewing the Torah episodes through Moses' eye is one of the most interesting aspects of Deuteronomy. Alright, so let us pass through as the descendants of Esau who dwell in Seir did for me, the Moabites who dwell in Ar, that I may cross the Jordan into the land that the Lord our God is giving us. 30. But Sihon, king of Heshbon, refused to let us pass through because the Lord had stiffened his will and hardened his heart in order to deliver him into your power, as is now the case. Now, in Numbers 21, there's no mention of God hardening Sihon's heart. It merely says that the king refused to let the Israelites pass through. They refused the request to peacefully pass through his land. And this is the only instance in the Torah, aside from the famous case of the Egyptian Pharaoh, in which God is described as hardening a person's heart. If you have the Rational Bible on Exodus, you can read about this in the essay, Did God Deprive Pharaoh of Free Will? This is in Exodus 4:21 in the Exodus Rational Bible. So if you have that, then you can go check it out. If not, maybe you can order it and then check it out. And Lord willing, in the future, I don't know when, maybe not in the near future, but at some point in the future, I'll go through it. I'll go through it. Then I'll get to that essay. But I don't know when, but hopefully in the future, Lord willing. And the Lord said to me, See, I begin by placing Sihon and his hand at your disposal. Begin the occupation and take possession of the land. Sihon with all of his men took the field against us at Jahaz, and the Lord our God delivered him to us, and we defeated him and his sons and all of his men. 34. Well, here's the essay. The moral problem of killing men, women, and children in the Torah. Alright, 34 now. And at that time we captured all of his towns, and we doomed every town, men, women, and the children, leaving no survivor. And we retained as booty only the cattle and the spoil of the cities that we captured. And from Aroer, on the edge of the Arnon Valley, including the town and the valley itself, to Gilead. Not a city was too mighty for us, for the Lord our God delivered everything to us. Now, based on the evidence of Moses himself, Moses was not speaking literally, asserting that the Israelites obliterated all of Sihon's people. The Israelites never wiped out every member of any nation, even the Canaanites. Yeah, even whenever they would take the promised land in Joshua, they don't get rid of all the Canaanites, even though they were supposed to. Yeah. And that God later instructed the Israelites not to marry Canaanites, made it clear that there would be many surviving Canaanite women to marry and men as well. This verse prohibiting the intermarriage with the Canaanites reads, this is in Deuteronomy 7, You shall not intermarry with them, and do not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons. And 2 verses later, Moses instructed the Israelites to tear down the Canaanites' altars, but did not order the Israelites to kill them. Okay. So, in addition, despite the claims in the later book of Joshua of Israel's total victory over the Canaanites, it seems like many Canaanite nations and people survived. For example, see Judges 1:27 through 33. Thus the book of Judges, which follows Joshua, records that the Israelites often adopted the practices of their Canaanite neighbors, exactly what the Torah feared would happen. Yeah, Judges, you have a cycle of the Israelites constantly being disobedient, falling into sin, worshiping other gods. God sends oppressors as punishment, but then God has compassion on his people still, and then later he'll send these deliverers or judges to free the people from oppression, and there will be a period of peace, and then the cycle will go on repeating itself. So, now it may be worth noting that while the Torah states that God gave the Israelites victory over Sihon, it does not state that God ordered the Israelites to wipe out Sihon's people. Because, this is one of the criticisms, I think even by progressive Christians and even non-Christians, like God's not good because he commanded Israel to wipe out people. So, God showed mercy to that Canaanite Rahab. If the Canaanites would have repented, and they had like over 400 years to do so, then I'm sure the ones that repented would not have been wiped out. They would have been grafted into the people of Israel. I think Rahab was, But they did not repent, and God judged them, and he used Israel to do it. Alright, now in his book, Biblical Literacy, Joseph Telushkin puts this issue into moral perspective. Most important, the reason that the Israelites' conduct so disturbs us is because the Bible itself has sensitized us to high standards of respect for human life, especially in commands to love our neighbor and to love the stranger. As the late Princeton philosopher Walter Kaufman wrote, the reproach of callousness and insufficient social conscience can hardly be raised. Our social conscience comes largely from the religion of Moses. But Kaufman noted to find the spirit of the Old Testament in the description of the battles with the Canaanites is like finding the distinctive genius of America in the men who slaughtered the Indians. Furthermore, that was the end of that quote from that philosopher. Furthermore, the Bible's disturbing ethics of warfare can perhaps be best explained in the terms of monotheism's struggle to survive. Monotheism started out as a minority movement with a different theology and ethical system than the rest of the world. It expanded and developed because it had one small corner in the world where it could grow unmolested. Had the Hebrews continued to reside amidst the pagan and child-sacrificing Canaanite culture, monotheism would have also certainly died. And then the late Bible scholar however you say that, Kaufman, had similarly argued that it was only because of the wars of Israel fought against the Canaan nations that Israel did not assimilate to the indigenous population that provided Israel's new religion with an environment in which to grow free from the influence of a popular pagan culture. Alright, that's the end of that quote from that Bible scholar. Now, the reason humanity came to be morally troubled by the killing of King Shihon's people or of the other Canaanites is that the Torah and the rest of the Bible taught humanity. But the reason humanity came to be morally troubled by the killing of King Shihon's people and or of the other Canaanites is that the Torah and the rest of the Bible taught humanity to be morally troubled by such killing. Therefore, I do not dismiss the Torah because of a moral problem that the Torah alone taught humanity to regard as a moral problem. Moreover, if neither war against Sihon or against the Canaanites involved extermination, would there be any of those who reject the Bible and its belief in this God and this Bible? I doubt it. Few people who reject God and the Bible do so because of Sihon or Canaan. The alleged wiping out of the Canaanites is almost always an excuse to reject the Bible, not the reason. Those who reject the Bible and its God also reject the God who gave the Ten Commandments and the God who commanded love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19:18. If the Bible consisted of only one chapter, that of the Ten Commandments, they would still reject the God of the Bible and the Bible too. Agreed, because our sinful nature is hostile to God and His commandments. So it wouldn't matter what stories you would have in here and what not. You would still reject the God of the one who inspired them. You reject the one who inspired it. My own experience attests to this. I have given video presentations explaining the Ten Commandments, which I have garnered tens of millions of views around the world. These videos have received more hate and mockery online than any of the hundreds of other videos of my educational organization, Prager. So these videos received more hatred and mockery than all of this other ones that are on Prager, that Prager has put on the internet. Finally, if God had indeed ordered the killing of all of Sihon's people, or all of the Canaanites, I would offer two responses. First, if God is good and just, which is the entire premise of the Bible, yes, He is, God has His reasons to order the killing of the inhabitants of Sihon and of Canaan. Yeah, agreed. Mainly because He's judging them for sin. All right, now just as the United States has reasons, just as the United States in its defensive and just war against Japan had legitimate reasons to drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II. And the dropping of these two bombs ended World War II in the Pacific. And that meant the lives of millions of Americans, Japanese, and others were saved. And it meant the end of the Japanese regime, which was Nazi-like, given the horrors it perpetrated in Korea and China. And the only other good explanation would be that God is not good but evil. However, an evil God would render the world a perverse joke, which is essentially how it was portrayed in the pre-biblical world with capricious, unjust, and cruel gods. But if the God of the Bible is evil, how do you explain the Ten Commandments, the love your neighbor commandment, the laws concerned with reducing animal suffering, the bans on oppressing the vulnerable, and the repeated demands for justice for the poor, the widow, and the orphan, and the plea that nation shall not lift sword against nation, nor will they learn war anymore, and so much more emphasis on goodness. On goodness. So how do you explain all these good things if God was evil? It's far easier to explain a good God who is demanding a once in 3,000 years call to decimate Canaanites than an evil God who is preoccupied with goodness, compassion, and justice. Yeah, it's much easier to explain because it doesn't make any sense why you would have an evil God who was preoccupied with those things that would be the opposite of evil. Finally, and perhaps most important of all, nowhere in the Torah or in the rest of the Bible is there permission, let alone a commandment, to ever again destroy a nation. This was a singular event at a particular time. No Israelite or Jew ever understood the wars against Canaan or Sihon as a way to wage war, even a just war. And this is not a template for us to just go out and just always fight wars. These were in their own time. And ultimately for God to bring judgment on these sinful nations at the time. Alright, in the final verse, 37. But you did not encroach upon the land of the Ammonites along the Wadi Jabbok and the towns of the hill country, just as the Lord our God had commanded. Okay. And that's it. That's all of chapter 2 out of the Prager Bible. Alright, so Lord willing, we will get to chapter 3 next time. So keep listening, and I'll see you then.